Right, good afternoon, colleagues, delegates. We now have a quorum, so we'll begin. But if more parties are arriving, please take your seats and insert your voting cards. And I have an announcement to make. Being asked that when you leave for lunch, you all take your voting cards with you. I think it's been noted that a lot of voting cards have been left in the microphone slot, and that's an invitation perhaps for them to go missing or to be lost. So once the session closes, then please take your voting cards away with you and keep them safe, of course. So yesterday we created two working groups, in fact, and we said we'd provide details of the terms of reference and some suggested chairs. So I'm sorry we weren't able to announce those earlier today. But the working group on document 64, or item 64, on marine turtles, Chelonidae and Dermochelidae species, the terms of reference will read as follows. The working group on marine turtles, Chelonidae species and Dermochelidae species shall A. Revise the draft resolution in CoP19 Doc 64.2 as amended by the Secretariat, taking into account the comments and interventions made in Committee 1, and B. Consider and revise, as necessary, the renewal of Decision 18.217, Rev CoP19, and the draft decision proposed by Samoa. And we have been looking for someone to chair that, and the European Union kindly offered or indicated their willingness to do so. So I thank the European Union for that. And then continuing with our second working group that we created yesterday, on item 87.2, aquatic species listed in the CITES appendices, proposals for a new approach to the listing of sharks and rays. The mandate, or terms of reference, shall be the working group on aquatic species listed in the CITES appendices, proposals for a new approach to the listing of sharks and rays shall consider and revise, as necessary, the proposed draft decisions by Senegal for a process to enable consideration of the possible need for the review of Resolution Conference 924, Rev CoP17, and its footnote on the application of decline for commercially exploited aquatic species with regards to the class Chondrichthyes, if I can pronounce that. Again, we've been looking for a chair, and the United Kingdom kindly indicated their willingness to do that. So we're grateful for United Kingdom for that. We will post details of the working groups and when they'll be meeting will be posted on the COP19 website as soon as rooms are allocated. And we will also try and make an announcement at the start of each session about relevant working groups too. So that brings those two items up to date. And right, okay, we've just lost our quorum while I'm speaking, so maybe that says what you think of me speaking, but if parties could please make sure, we need one more party to insert their card into the microphone slot so that we can actually continue with the session. We're a quorum, and we have a quorum again, so we can continue. So colleagues, just before I start with the next agenda item. Just a reminder that we started the day 2 agenda items behind. We're now 4 agenda items behind our schedule. So, I will, repeat my request to you that to keep your interventions short, to focus on amending or to focus on the issues that the COP is being asked to decide, and only intervene if you desperately need to. If somebody else has made your point, you can refer to a previous intervention and make yours shorter. So we do need to try and catch up some time, if we can. However, the next item on our agenda is item 70 with document CoP19, Doc 70, and I invite the chair of the Plants Committee to introduce this, I think. So if the floor could be given to Gabon. Okay. We'll just give you a moment. I see you maybe just got here. So.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Président, à cette 18e session, la conférence des parties a adopté les décisions 18.234 à 18.237 relatives aux espèces d'arbres produisant du bois de rose à l'adresse du secrétariat, des parties, du comité pour les plantes et du comité permanent. Lors de sa 25e session, le comité pour les plantes a convenu de soumettre des projets de décision à la 19e session de la conférence des parties afin de poursuivre les travaux sur les espèces d'arbres produisant du bois de rose. Ces projets de décision figurant dans l'annexe 1 du document COP19-70 sont les suivants. À l'adresse du secrétariat 19.AA, sous réserve de ressources externes, le secrétariat petit a, en consultation avec le comité pour les plantes, élabore les objectifs de l'étude proposée sur les espèces d'arbres produisant du bois de rose en tenant compte des conclusions et recommandations contenues dans les documents PC25 Doc 26.1, PC25 Doc 26.2 et PC25 Doc 26.3. Commande une étude, petit b, commande une étude sur la conservation et le commerce des espèces d'arbres produisant du bois de rose identifiées en tenant compte des priorités, des conclusions et des recommandations contenues dans les documents PC25 Doc 26.1, PC25 Doc 26.2, PC25 Doc 26.3. Petit c, rend compte des progrès de l'étude au comité pour les plantes. Petit d, tenant compte de ce qui précède, organise un atelier national en invitant les États des aires de répartition concernées, les pays qui pratiquent le commerce, les organisations pertinentes, les représentants de l'industrie et autres spécialistes en vue de présenter et de discuter des résultats et de préparer des recommandations. Et, petit e, soumet l'étude finale au comité pour les plantes pour examen ainsi que les résultats de l'atelier s'il a eu lieu. À l'adresse du comité pour les plantes, décision 19BB, le comité pour les plantes examine tous les progrès communiqués par le secrétariat en ce qui concerne l'application de la décision 19AA, œuvre avec le secrétariat à l'élaboration des objectifs de l'étude et fait des recommandations au comité permanent et à la conférence des parties s'il y a lieu. À l'adresse des parties, décision 19CC, les parties sont invitées à collaborer avec le secrétariat et avec le comité pour les plantes à l'application des décisions 19AA et 19BB et à soutenir les travaux de l'étude ainsi que l'atelier international, notamment en recherchant des ressources externes auprès d'organisations et d'acteurs concernés. Enfin, à l'adresse du comité permanent 19DD, le comité permanent, petit a, examine tout rapport relatif à l'application des décisions 19AA à 19CC. Petit b, identifie toute question de mise en œuvre et d'application associée au commerce international des espèces d'arbres produisant du bois de rose, en particulier celles qui sont identifiées comme une priorité par le comité pour les plantes, et, petit c, fait des recommandations à la conférence des parties s'il y a lieu. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Chair of the Plants Committee, for that introduction. I now open the floor for comments by parties, and I ask you in particular to focus on the draft decisions in Annex 1. So the floor is open. Right, thank you. I now have the European Union to speak first, followed by the United States, and then Senegal. So, EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We support the draft decisions as agreed by the Plants Committee and most of the edits by the Secretariat. We fully recommend their considerations to CoP19. We're extremely concerned about the sharply increasing trade and trade shifts in rosewood species and legume timbers that are not currently included within the CITES appendices. We're also fully committed to enforcing and ensuring a legal and sustainable trade in those rosewood species which are included, and note that despite CITES efforts, a pervasive illegal trade still exists for many rosewood species. So we support the draft decisions and most of the edits of the Secretariat, and we just would seek clarification on, directed to the Standing Committee, 19cc, whether paragraph little b there should comment from the Secretariat whether they really want to strike out that issue on implementation and enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I'll just capture some more comments and we can come back to that. So, United States, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Chair. It sounds like we might align ourselves with the previous delegate, and we do support the draft decisions of the Plants Committee, including most of the amendments by the Secretariat regarding draft decision 19AA, while we would prefer for the Plants Committee to provide input on the study prior to its use at an NDF workshop. We can accept deletion of the subparagraph C, but would ask that it be noted in the summary record of this meeting that the Technical Advisory Group for the International Experts Workshop should consider whether the study is appropriate to include on the agenda at that meeting. To this decision, we would also add a new subparagraph A, recognizing that additional information has been generated in relation to CITES-listed tree species that may be referred to as rosewood. As such, we recommend a new draft decision that would precede the suite of decisions directing the Secretariat to compile an updated list of activities as follows. And I apologize, we did not submit this in advance. So it would be new subparagraph A, compile and submit for consideration of the Plants Committee information, an overview and status of work completed, underway, or to be undertaken as a result of CoP19 to improve CITES implementation for rosewood tree species. So I think that might be a little awkward, but the idea is that the information that's been brought forward to date as of this meeting would be important to have in mind. Okay, shall I repeat it or?
Yes, please.
Okay. Compile and submit for consideration of the Plants Committee information, an overview and status of work completed, underway, or to be undertaken as a result of CoP19 to improve CITES implementation for rosewood tree species. And perhaps it should be on the agenda at CoP19. I see now it looks a little awkward, and I apologize. The remaining paragraphs would be renumbered accordingly And then regarding the new draft decision 19CC, we support the amendments to paragraph A and the deletion of paragraph B, as well as the amendments to what were previous subparagraphs C, and which is now B. But we recommend a further addition to this subparagraph as follows. So the subparagraph B would say, make recommendations with the Secretariat's edits aimed at improving the implementation. We would add the words, comma, interpretation, comma, and enforcement of the Convention for Rosewood Tree Species, as, et cetera, as it's shown in the document. So we would just add the words interpretation and enforcement to that subparagraph. We also support the deletion of the previous decisions 18.234 to 18.237. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, United States. Just making sure we've captured exactly what you were intending. I now give the floor to Senegal, followed by United Kingdom. Senegal.
Voilà, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Donc, à l'instar des partis qui ont précédé le Sénégal, donc nous s'inscrivons vraiment en faveur de cette proposition. Donc, lié au bois de terre-carpus, lié au bois rose, produisant du bois de rose. Mais je rappelle qu'au niveau de la sous-région ouest africaine, d'une manière générale, donc l'espèce qui est la plus visible, donc au niveau de cette zone, c'est le Pterocarpus erinaceus. Et actuellement, il y a une décision, une notification qui est en vigueur, qui suspend donc le commerce de cette espèce. Donc, il se trouve qu'il y a certains problèmes par rapport à cette espèce, parce qu'il y a des stocks qui ont été constitués avant l'entrée de cette notification. Donc, un stock de bois disponible pour certains pays qui n'ont pas la capacité d'absorber cette quantité au niveau national. Donc, il serait bien que le comité des plantes se penche sur cette question, donc qui est fondamentale, parce que c'est des pays qui en dépendent et que leur économie aussi en dépend. Il faudra vraiment que les gens pensent sur cela. Donc, par rapport aussi à l'atelier international, donc je pense que c'est une belle initiative qu'il faudra saluer et qu'il faudra vraiment mettre en œuvre donc, pour une meilleure compréhension et une meilleure appréciation de l'utilisation de ce bois rose au niveau international. En tout cas, le Sénégal n'est pas un pays d'exportation du bois de rose, donc c'est une espèce qui est intégralement protégée, mais le Sénégal est à l'auteur de l'inscription de cette espèce au niveau des annexes de la CITES, pour dire tout simplement que le Sénégal tient fortement à la conservation de cette espèce, qui est une espèce vraiment de grande valeur pour nos écosystèmes, qui contribue aux économies, qui a plusieurs utilités donc, au niveau national. Donc la préservation de cette espèce vraiment nous paraît fondamentale, mais le commerce aussi est une autre chose, mais qu'il faudra faire dans la durabilité. Ensuite, l'autre problème, c'est par rapport aux avis de commerce non préjudiciables. Nos pays sont invités à réaliser des avis de commerce non préjudiciables, mais comme vous le savez, dans nos pays, souvent les ressources sont très limitées. Donc à cet égard, nous invitons vraiment le secrétariat à venir en aide à ces États qui veulent réaliser ces ACNP, mais qui n'ont pas les ressources nécessaires. Sans cela, la suspension va perdurer au niveau de la sous-région, alors qu'il y a des pays qui ont une forte potentialité de valorisation. Il faudra penser à ces États-là et voir comment ils peuvent exploiter ces ressources qui doivent servir à l'économie nationale. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Senegal. We'll now take United Kingdom, then Guatemala.
Thank you, Chair. The UK supports the draft decisions, the continuation of this work, and the international workshop as proposed by the Secretariat in their comments. The UK agrees that it would be beneficial to combine the proposed workshop in this document with that proposed in Doc 43.1 on non-detriment findings. If this was to happen, the UK suggests that an agenda is drafted to establish clear outcomes that support the desired outcomes for both rosewood timber species and non-detriment findings. Given the substantive changes proposed, the UK would like to suggest an in-session document be produced to allow us to consider this proposal fully. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I now give the floor to Guatemala.
Gracias, señor presidente. Guatemala apoya las recomendaciones dadas por la Secretaría y el proyecto de decisión propuesto por el Comité de Flora y quiere hacer mención en particular a que este grupo de árboles que es tan amplio necesita una intervención bastante oportuna, teniendo en cuenta que hay muchos de estos géneros que aún no están incluidos en CITES y que a la luz de los estudios que se han realizado con el apoyo del programa Las CITES para especies arbóreas, que en el caso de Guatemala también investigó acerca de las especies similares no listadas en CITES, es muy importante también empezar a trabajar sobre datos de comercio y sobre la caracterización de estas otras especies que sabemos que son prioridad 2 hasta este momento, pero que no dejan de ser de preocupación para los países. Estamos muy de acuerdo con que se pueda llevar a cabo un taller de expertos y que podamos seguir trabajando en la contribución para la mejor formulación de los dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial. Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Guatemala, and that concludes the list of parties asking for the floor. I'll give observers a chance to make any interventions if they wish. I don't see any, so with that, we'll just check that we've got the right changes, and then I'll come back to you in a second. So thank you, colleagues. We've just been looking at the changes, making sure that we got everything together. We note the request from the UK to have a ComDoc that people can see everything down in black and white, and you can then judge if you're happy with the various amendments going forward. So we will do that as the next course of action, and you can then review it. We heard quite a lot of support, of course, for the draft decisions, plus amendments from the Secretariat, and of course, various revisions suggested. And I also heard support for the deletion of the previous decisions, 18.234 and to 18.237. So we agree that those should be deleted. So we will come back with the ComDoc, and you can then examine the changes in greater depth. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to agenda item 79, CoP19, document 79 on African tree species. And again, I would invite the chair of the Plants Committee to introduce the document, and so if technicians could give the floor to Gabon, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À sa 18e session, la conférence des parties a adopté, à l'adresse du Comité pour les plantes, la décision 17302 relative aux espèces d'arbres africaines, d'une part, et la décision 18260 portant sur Prunus africana, d'autre part. Un groupe de travail sur les espèces d'arbres africaines a été établi, avec un mandat notamment de soumettre un rapport sur les progrès réalisés dans la mise en œuvre des décisions 17302 et 18260. Sur la base des recommandations de ce groupe de travail, le Comité pour les plantes a préparé des projets de décision et invite la conférence des parties à les adopter. Ces projets de décision figurent à l'annexe 1 du document considéré. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Chair of the Plants Committee, for that introduction, and referring, of course, to the draft decisions in Annex 1. So with that, I open the floor for any comments from parties. I don't see any, so in that case, I spoke too soon. United States, you have the floor, followed by Eritrea.
Thank you, Chair. The United States applauds this work to support the sustainable use and management of African tree species and appreciates the progress made in the previous intersession, including discussions of the Plants Committee Working Group on African tree species, informative outcomes emanating from the CITES Tree Species Program Regional Meeting for Africa, and the Secretariat's compilation of information in support of implementing the decisions. We support the draft decisions of the Plants Committee contained in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 79 on African tree species, and would recommend an amendment to Decision 19AA, Paragraph B, to simply add the phrase, "and other relevant information," and I'll tell you where that would go. In the Paragraph B, it reads, based on documents, and then it lists 3 Plants Committee documents. We would add a comma and the words "and other relevant information," comma, and then continue on with the paragraph as it reads. We do not support the recommendation to delete subparagraph A, which was a little unclear actually, and I apologize, I didn't follow up with the Secretariat to see if that was the intention in Decision 19AA. There's no strike-through on the text, but the renumbering in the ensuing paragraphs suggested that that was a recommendation to delete the paragraph. And in what is written in the document in the Secretariat's comments is paragraph, currently reading paragraph A, but original paragraph B. We do have 2 proposed amendments. We support the first amendment to include recommendations for sustainable management, but we do not support the second amendment, which would unnecessarily limit the Plants Committee's efforts. Sorry. As such, we would not support the amendments to that paragraph. And with regard to the amendments proposed to paragraph D to 19AA and draft decision 19CC, we do not support these changes, which would require all of the Plants Committee reporting and recommendations to go through the Standing Committee. It is fully within the Scientific Committee purview to make recommendations as appropriate directly to the Conference of the Parties. In closing, we recognize that a decision is not needed to allow the Plants Committee to strike a working group, but we hope that the good work of this group will continue in the next intersession in support of the range countries and importing countries. We also support deletion of decisions 17.302 on African tree species and decisions 18.260, to 18.262 on African cherry, Prunus africana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, United States. I think we've got your comments there. So Eritrea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Since it's the first time Eritrea is taking the floor, I wish to express our thanks and appreciation to the people and government of Panama for hosting CITES CoP19 in such a wonderful setting. Moreover, we congratulate you on your election to the chair of this committee and wish you all the best for your endeavors. We commend that the Plants Committee for preparing Doc 79 on African tree species. Moreover, we support the draft decisions presented under Annex 1 of COP19 Doc 79. We like to emphasize, however, that adequate time is given in updating the list so far collected, believing that this task will demand more time and consultation. Thank you, sir, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Eritrea. That concludes the list of parties asking for the floor. I will see if there are any observers that may wish to make an intervention. No. Okay, I will conclude in a moment. Just 1 second. Right, thank you, United States and parties, for your comments. We're just checking that we have everything correct. So looking at the Secretariat comments, I think the 19AA, which appears as though it might have been deleted, is going to be retained in what should now be paragraph B. We would have a reference to adding any other relevant information after the various Plants Committee documents. I think United States, the text at the end, as contained in these documents, we would delete. And in 19AA-D, as it would be now, would retain the language at the end and the conference of the parties as appropriate. Is that your revisions correctly summarized? And of course, you also agreed to deletion of decisions 17302 and 18260 to 262. Is that correctly captured? Yes. Okay. So with that, I think we can close this document and move on. And we now move on to document CoP19, document 81, which is on neotropical tree species. Again, I would call on the chair of the Plants Committee to introduce this, and if we could give the floor now to Gabon. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, à sa 18e session, la conférence des parties a adopté, à l'adresse du Comité pour les plantes, la décision 18-299 relative aux espèces d'arbres néotropicales. Cette décision donnait mandat au Comité pour les plantes de reconduire le groupe de travail intersession sur les espèces d'arbres néotropicales qui a travaillé par voie électronique pour notamment décider d'une liste prioritaire d'arbres néotropicales inscrites aux annexes de la CITES, de rendre compte des progrès accomplis dans la gestion, la conservation et le commerce des espèces d'arbres néotropicales prioritaires, de mettre en place des systèmes de traçabilité et de suivi des responsabilités pour renforcer la transparence et le commerce durable de ces espèces d'arbres, et de concevoir des matériels d'identification et de formation sur les différentes méthodes existantes. Monsieur le Président, sur la base des recommandations formulées par le groupe de travail espèces d'arbres néotropicales, le Comité pour les plantes a préparé des projets de décision et invite la conférence des parties à les adopter. Ces projets de décision sont en annexe 1 du document 81. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Chair of the Plants Committee. And with that, I open this document for comments on the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 of the document. And I see Guatemala on my screen, so you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Quisiéramos, desde la delegación de Guatemala, agradecer la participación tan efectiva que ha tenido la región que comprende el área de distribución de estas especies de árboles neotropicales por su gran contribución a los procesos que el grupo de trabajo ha ido implementando durante mucho tiempo. Guatemala está de acuerdo con los proyectos de decisión que están establecidos en el anexo 1 del documento y solo tiene una observación para el proyecto de decisión 19CC, que en la versión en español dice se invita a las partes a colaborar cuando debería de ser se invita a la Secretaría a colaborar, ya que este proyecto de decisión está dirigido a la Secretaría. Creo que en la versión en inglés está correcto. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Guatemala. If there's a problem maybe with the text in terms of how it's been translated, or perhaps a phrase has been repeated or placed in the wrong place, but I think we can check on that and make sure that the Spanish and English versions are compatible. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. I have the United States now requesting the floor. So.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports adoption of the draft decisions in Annex 1 to document CoP19 Doc 81, with an addition to draft decision 19.AA that in updating the list of neotropical tree species, the Plants Committee should also consider the outcomes of CoP19. The United States agrees with the Secretariat's recommendation that decision 18.299 can be deleted as it has been carried forward in the new proposed draft decisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. So you would simply add at the end of paragraph 19AA, take into consideration the recommendations included in document PC 25.9 addenda and the outcome of CoP19. Yes? Perfect, thank you. I don't see any parties requesting the floor, so I would invite any comments from observers. And if there are none, then with that very minor amendment by the US, we will adopt as a recommendation from this committee the draft decisions contained in Annex 1, and we will also delete decision 18299. Yeah, and there's no other decisions that need deleting, so I think with that we can close document 81 and move on to document CoP19, Doc 82 on medicinal and aromatic plant species. And again, I turn to the chair of the Plants Committee to introduce the document, and we can give the floor to Gabon, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À sa 18e session, la conférence des parties a adopté les décisions 18.300 à 18.303 sur le commerce des plantes médicinales et aromatiques, dont la décision 18.302 à l'adresse du Comité pour les plantes. Le Comité pour les plantes a établi un groupe de travail qui a permis de décrire les progrès réalisés dans l'application des décisions susmentionnées et de faire référence au plan de travail potentiel sur les plantes médicinales et aromatiques inscrites aux annexes de la CITES et figurant dans le document d'information COP18-INF11, qui liste les mesures susceptibles d'améliorer le suivi du commerce et les rapports sur les plantes médicinales et aromatiques inscrites aux annexes de la CITES. Monsieur le Président, sur la base des recommandations du groupe de travail, le Comité pour les plantes a préparé des projets de décision et invite la conférence des parties à les adopter. Ces projets de décision, à l'adresse du secrétariat, des parties, du Comité pour les plantes et du Comité permanent, figurent en annexe 1 du document COP19 Doc 82. Avant de conclure, Monsieur le Président, je souhaiterais mentionner les documents d'information COP19-INF31 soumis par le secrétariat et le document COP19-INF32 soumis par Royal Botanic Gardens à Kew au Royaume-Uni de Grande-Bretagne et d'Irlande du Nord. Le document COP19-INF31 dresse la liste des espèces de plantes médicinales et aromatiques actuellement inscrites aux annexes 1, 2 et 3 de la CITES. L'objet du document COP19-INF32 est d'informer les parties sur la base de données Medicinal Plant Name Services, comme elle est référencée dans les projets de décision relatifs aux espèces de plantes médicinales et aromatiques. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Chair of the Plants Committee, for that introduction and additional information. So I now draw your attention to the draft decisions in Annex 1 and invite comments from parties on these. So the floor is open, and I see the United States, followed by China and the European Union. So, US, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports a continuation of this work to the next intersession, prioritizing those activities that have a CITES nexus, including topics in the planned second non-detriment findings workshop. We support some, but not all, of the Secretariat's amendments to the draft decisions, and I'd like to briefly tell you the ones that we do not support. First of all, we do not support the revisions to draft decision 19AA that would delete the direction to liaise with the Plants Committee, especially in the chapeau to the decision. Regarding revised draft decision 19CC, we do not support the amendments to paragraph A to delete the direction for the Plants Committee to inform the study in decision 19AA nor the amendment to paragraph C, which would not allow the Plants Committee to submit recommendations to the Conference of the Parties if it deems it appropriate. We firmly believe that the technical experts in the Plants Committee should inform efforts under these decisions in consultation with the parties in their region, especially as it relates to a study and the use of medicinal plant name service. We also reiterate that the Plants Committee is not required to pass all recommendations through the Standing Committee. We will welcome the opportunity to review the use of the Q medicinal plant name service, but we remain cautiously skeptical of using such a database. We reiterate that the Species Plus database is not the official CITES species checklist. While having access to the pharmaceutical trade names associated with CITES-listed species may have its utility, we are skeptical of how this information would be used and the implications of using an external database. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I think we've got your comments there. I now give the floor to China, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. As written in paragraph 8 of document 82 and recorded at the 25th meeting of the Plans Committee, we naturally insist that the amendment to the draft decisions proposed by the alternate representative of Asia be adopted. With regard to the revisions to draft decisions, paragraph A of 90cc proposed by the Secretariat, which relates to any changes to the standard nomenclature reference or the checklist of CITES, we request that this work be moved to the standard nomenclature and led by our nomenclature specialists. Dear Chair, for the sake of simplicity, I suggest that you establish a draft working group with the participation of China and consolidate the task with the assistance of the Secretariat. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, China. And I give the floor now to the European Union.
Thanks for the floor, Chair. I speak for the EU and its 27 member states. The EU generally supports the draft decisions, but would like to suggest one small amendment to draft decision 19cc small b, which Germany has already proposed in Plans Committee 25. The suggested amendment was not accepted by the Plans Committee due to concerns of parties that more time is needed to consider the amendment. So Germany was invited to submit the suggestion to CoP19, which is reflected in paragraph 8 of the current document. In the end of draft decision 19cc small b, the Plans Committee is meant to prepare recommendations for a revised resolution on traditional medicines or a new resolution on plant-based medicinal products. Regarding the potential new resolution, the EU thinks that a restriction to medicinal products is too limited and would not take into account that many products containing medicinal and aromatic plants are not medicinal products in a strict sense, but would rather be considered cosmetics, personal care products, food supplements, and so on. We think that this has also been the general understanding of the Plans Committee Working Group and the analysis of the Secretariat that have been provided in documents PC 25 Doc 30 and COP18 Inf 11, so that this larger scope should then be taken into account when considering any potential new resolution about plant-based products. We would therefore like to propose the following amendment. In decision 19cc small b, in the last line, deletion of the term plant-based medicinal products and replacement with the term medicinal and aromatic plants products. The last line of decision 19cc small b would then read, resolution on traditional medicines or a new resolution on medicinal and aromatic plants products. Thank you.
Thank you. European Union, I don't have any more requests from parties. Again, I'll invite observers to intervene if they wish. All right, I do have Cameroon want to take the floor, so Cameroon, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Cameroun accueille favorablement les projets de décision compte tenu du potentiel élevé du pays en plantes médicinales. Le Cameroun appuie cette décision et que des efforts soient déployés pour accompagner le pays pour la gestion durable de ces espèces, notamment à deux niveaux: l'élaboration des normes de gestion telles les techniques de récolte et les techniques de production et de multiplication de ces espèces. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Cameroon. I've had opened the floor to observers, and I see Traffic. So, Traffic, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of Traffic and the IUCN Medicinal Plant Specialist Group. We welcome draft decisions included in Annex 1 of Document 82. CITES provides an important form of regulation of international trade in medicinal and aromatic plants, with over 800 of these species listed in Appendix 2. While these species are representative of varied taxonomic groups, there are distinctive common features of their trade that warrant continued consideration as a group within CITES. We support the intervention of the European Union regarding the inclusion of term and aromatic in any further resolutions. We would like to draw the attention of parties to a range of specialized tools for medicinal and aromatic plants trade, developed specifically to support CITES implementation. This includes the Fair Wild Standard and the 9-step guidance on NDFs for perennial plants. A recent joint FAO, IUCN and Traffic report, Wild Check, assessing the risks and opportunities of trade in wild plant ingredients, and the accompanying platform at wildcheck.org could support the implementation of the proposed draft decisions 19AAA and 19DBA. The platform aims to enhance awareness of value chains, of CITES regulations and trade interventions, and encourages sustainable use and legal trade in medicinal and aromatic plants. We call on parties and other stakeholders to join this collaborative platform. A side event held today in Caribbean 5 at 5:15 p.m. will provide an opportunity for parties to exchange experiences around the solutions to ensure sustainable trade in medicinal and aromatic plants, and we welcome everyone to join. Finally, we stand ready to support the implementation of the draft decisions, including to potentially undertake the in-depth analysis of e-commerce value chains in products of CITES-listed medicinal and aromatic plants, should the draft decision be adopted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. And if you just give me a moment to check I've got everything correctly, all the amendments correctly in the document here, and then I will sum up. Thank you. So we have, all the amendments that have been proposed from the floor. But I think, China, you were suggested you wanted a working group and implied you have a lot more sort of changes to make. Could you give us a feel for those the changes and text you want?
I believe we have that changes in the PC summary record, PC 25 summary record. There has been recorded in the summary record. So it's quite substantive, so it would be better to have the chance to consolidate this text, also including the CITES comments and the US comments. Would that be a very small working group? Thank you.
Okay, sorry, United States, you want the floor?
Apologies for requesting the floor again. I wonder if it wouldn't be possible for us to include a direction for the Plants Committee to have those discussions in the next intersession so that we can better inform how this work can be done. I know that a lot of times discretion is given to the Plants Committee to shape how we'll look at subjects. Thank you.
Yes, I think United States there are ways of doing that. I think probably the best way, rather than trying to resolve that, I believe the comments in the summary record from the Plants Committee are quite considerable and therefore can't really be debated in this kind of forum constructively. So maybe I think I would suggest a small drafting group to consist of the United States, EU, China, and traffic as the key people who have had an interest here. See if you can come up with a way forward with these draft decisions that would take account of China's comments and maybe find a way for the Plants Committee to be able to deal with these issues before CoP20. So if parties are content with that, I'll ask those three parties and traffic to go away and try and come back with a revised set of decisions that takes account of the summary record from the Plants Committee, but also what we've been discussing here today and including the Secretariat comments, which people who have spoken have largely kind of accepted with some changes, I know, not entirely. So, and clearly, whilst we're going to have this drafting group, then we're not in a position to delete the previous decisions yet until we adopt any revised decisions. So, I think we'll leave it at that, and we will arrange something or somewhere for the drafting group to meet. Okay? Yes, thank you. Okay. So with that, we can conclude discussions on, for now, on document 82. And we're now sort of catching up with our agenda for this afternoon, and this takes us, if you let me sort my papers out, into item 84 on maintenance of the appendices and standard nomenclature, and document 84.1. So with that, it's going to be introduced by the nomenclature specialist from the Plants and Animals Committee, and I believe the Plants Committee nomenclature specialist is going to introduce this. So can we now give the floor to Delegate 704? You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We wish to start by thanking the Government of Panama for hosting and organizing this meeting, and the Panamanian people for the warm welcome we have received ever since touching down at the airport. we congratulate you on your election as chair of this committee and apologize in advance that introducing our document will take more than 3 minutes. CoP19 document 84.1 presents the Animals and Plant Committee's report on standard nomenclature. I will present the section on flora nomenclature, which covers paragraphs 6 to 16, and will then hand over to my colleague from the Animals Committee to cover fauna issues, as well as the matter relating to the nomenclature of Appendix 3 listings, which concern both flora and fauna. Document 84.1 annexes that are relevant to the flora are Annex 1, containing new or revised draft decisions, Annex 2, an update to the Annex to Resolution Conf 12.11, which formulates updates to list of standard nomenclature references for flora, and Annex 4 is the impact on the appendices of the flora nomenclature recommendations. Now to the core report. Paragraphs 6 to 9 summarizes the decisions and work plan relating to flora nomenclature that was adopted at COP18, as well as the documents discussed during PC25. Paragraphs 10 to 14 summarizes the recommendations of the Plants Committee as follows. Concerning the genus Aloe, the Plants Committee recommended that an updated standard reference for aloe species need to be prepared. It is recommended that the decisions 19A1 to 19A2, as outlined in Annex 1, be adopted by this meeting of the Conference of the Parties. The annex to document PC25 COM5 contains a list of aloe names treated as synonyms in the new alloid genera and additional revisions that was identified. It is recommended that in the interim, this document be included as a supplementary reference for the aloes in the standard nomenclature references in Resolution Conf 12.11 as outlined in Annex 2. And parties are further reminded that all Lumatophyllum names are scientific synonyms of CITES listed aloe species and are thus regulated under the Convention. Concerning the genus Pachypodium, in the past, the CITES checklists for the genera Aloe and Pachypodium were combined in the same document. The Plants Committee recommended that a separate, updated standard reference for Pachypodium need to be prepared. It is recommended that decisions 19B1 to 19B2, as outlined in Annex 1, be adopted by this meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Concerning Cactaceae, COP18 adopted a series of decisions to monitor the use and impact of the third edition of the CITES Cactaceae checklist and its supplement. Based on this feedback, the Plants Committee agreed that the preparation of a fourth edition of the CITES Cactaceae checklist should be a low priority. It is recommended that this meeting of the Conference of the Parties adopt the extension of the amended decisions 18.304 to 18.306 as outlined in Annex 1. Following the inclusion of Asticium valdesi in the synonymy of the Appendix 1 listed Asticium ritteri in the supplement to the Cactaceae checklist, and in the absence of a proposal to formally list Asticium valdesi in Appendix 1, it is recommended that Asticium valdesi be reinstated as a separate species and restored to Appendix 2, and that Marcia et al. 2013 be adopted as a standard nomenclature reference for this species as outlined in Annex 2. Concerning Diospyros species populations of Madagascar, the Plants Committee agreed that work towards an updated standard reference for Diospyros species of Madagascar be continued, and that, in the interim, a new time-stamped download from Vascular Plants of Madagascar be made available. I would like to make use of this opportunity to thank the editors of the Vascular Plants of Madagascar database for their commitment towards the work of CITES and for their efforts in making this new time-stamped version available in time for its proposal as a standard reference. It is recommended that decisions 19C1 to 19C2, as outlined in Annex 1, be adopted by this meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and that the new time-stamped download from Vascular Plants of Madagascar be adopted as the new standard nomenclature reference. Further on this matter, an amendment to the text in the third column of Annex 2 was requested in order to clarify the taxa covered in the proposed standard reference. It is thus recommended that the existing text, Diospyros species, populations of Madagascar, be expanded to read Diospyros species, populations of Madagascar, and then in brackets, large tree species. And this is outlined in addendum to CoP19 Doc 84.1, corrigenda to an Annex 2. Concerning Orchidaceae, a new standard nomenclature reference for Appendix 2 listed orchids was produced. And I would like to make use of this opportunity to thank the editors and contributors to this checklist for their hard work and dedication to get this publication ready. Further on this matter, an amendment to the text in the third column of Annex 2 has been reflected in the addendum to CoP19 Doc 84.1, corrigenda to Annex 2, in order to clarify the taxa covered in the standard reference. So it is thus recommended that the existing text, Orchidaceae, Appendix 2 listed orchids, be followed by the list of genera in brackets that are covered in this reference as it appears on the front page of the checklist document. It is recommended that decisions 19D1 to 19D2, as outlined in Annex 1, be adopted by this meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and that the new CITES Appendix 2 orchid checklist be adopted as the new standard nomenclature reference, as outlined in addendum to CoP19 Doc 84.1, corrigenda to Annex 2. Concerning taxa species, the Plants Committee agreed to retain the standard nomenclature reference as currently reflected in Resolution Conf 12.11, while the possibility of producing an updated standard reference is investigated. It is recommended that decisions 19E1 and 19E2, as outlined in Annex 1, be adopted by this meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Concerning Gibbertia species, the Plants Committee agreed that a standard reference is required for Gibbertia pellegriniana and that amendments to reflect the correct synonymy and distributions of this species is required. It is recommended that Leonard 1949 be adopted as the standard nomenclature reference for Gibbertia pellegriniana as outlined in Annex 2, and that amendments and corrections pertaining to the synonymy and distribution of the species is approved as set out in paragraph N and Appendix 4 of the current document. Concerning Dalbergia species, CoP18 adopted a series of decisions to undertake the development of an annotated CITES checklist of Dalbergia species. A first version of such a checklist is proposed as the new standard reference for Dalbergia species. The Plants Committee also noted that further work towards the annotated checklist will be needed following CoP19. I would like to thank the editors and contributors to this checklist for their continued hard work and dedication, and congratulate them for producing an excellent publication. It is recommended that the CITES Dalbergia checklist be adopted as the new standard nomenclature reference as outlined in Annex 2, and that the proposed extension and revisions of decisions 18.307 and 18.308 as set out in Annex 1 be adopted by this meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Concerning the proposed work plan for the next intersession, apart from the work emanating from the decisions in Annex 1 for the provision of new and/or updated standard references for taxa currently listed on the appendices, or for those listed at COP19, the following aspects were identified as part of the proposed flora nomenclature work plan: the correct name of Dipteryx oleifera, the classification of the genus Bulnesia and the correct name of Bulnesia sarmientoi, the correct treatment and placement on the appendices of the hybrid Turbinicarpus rosaifloris, and the consideration of the enforcement-related implications of updates of standard nomenclature references for flora species listed in the appendices. So to summarize, the key recommendations relating to flora are that the Conference of the Parties agree to the draft decisions 19A to 19E and the extension and proposed amendments to decisions 18.304 to 18.306 and decisions 18.307 to 18.308 as presented in Annex 1. The Conference of the Parties is also asked to adopt the proposed revisions to the Annex of Resolution Conf 12.11 relating to flora as included in Annex 2, including the proposed amendments to clarify the scope of the references for Diospyros species populations of Madagascar and the Appendix 2 listed orchids, as outlined in the addendum to document CoP19 Doc 84.1, Corrigenda to Annex 2. So that concludes the flora section of the report, and I will now hand over to my colleague from the Animals Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Nomenclature Specialist of the Plants Committee, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to present nomenclatural matters concerning animals. Document 84.1, from paragraph 17 onwards, summarizes the nomenclature work done in the Animals Committee at its 31st meeting, which was held online, as well as intersessional work with the Secretariat and parties. In paragraphs 18 to 21, it is explained how the Animals Committee recommends adoption of a new standard reference for birds, but was unable to fully assess the implications of that choice for the presentation of species in the appendices. It is therefore proposed to adopt a decision to continue this work in order to make a clear and comprehensive recommendation to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. With regard to the topic of using time-specific versions of online databases as standard nomenclature references, progress is reported in paragraphs 22 to 25. And progress concerning nomenclatural and identification of corals is noted in paragraphs 26 to 28. These complex activities have continued in close collaboration with the Secretariat, and a set of draft decisions to further this work can be found in paragraph H of the comments by the Secretariat on pages 13 and 14. With regard to decision 18.315, directed to the Animals Committee concerning the listing of pangolins in the appendices, this evolved into a wider consideration of higher taxon listings in the appendices, which is summarized in paragraphs 29 to 33. As a result, a new decision directed to both the Animals and Plants Committees to review this further was drafted and can be found in paragraph 33. Concerning the ongoing work of updating the list of standard nomenclature references in the annex of Resolution 12.11 on standard nomenclature, paragraph 34 summarizes the preparation of new checklists for species included in the appendices at CoP18, and paragraph 35 notes that Annex 3 of the present document lists additional nomenclatural references recommended for adoption. Annex 5 in turn lists the implications of these proposed adoptions for the appendices and for the use of species names in other CITES documentation. Paragraphs 38 to 40 describe two cases where CITES listed species were taxonomically split in a standard reference that was adopted at COP16, that is, split compared to the original listing and nomenclature standards, with the result that part of the originally listed species was not properly recognized in the appendices by the name of the split of species. This concerns a subspecies of the Kulan, Equus hemionus luteus, which needs to be explicitly acknowledged in Appendix 1, as well as Maxwell's duiker from West Africa, Philantomba maxwelli, to be explicitly noted in Appendix 2. Also, the growing scientific acceptance of two species of African elephants and its potential implications on CITES are noted in paragraph 41, which proposes a number of draft decisions directed to the Animals Committee, the Secretariat, and a Standing Committee to review and evaluate this complex subject with the view of providing clear recommendations to COP20. Paragraph 44 notes an initiative to develop a standardized global checklist of plant and animal species and its potential relevance to CITES and other multilateral environmental agreements. And in paragraph M, the Secretariat proposes a decision to enable the nomenclature specialists of the Animals and Plants Committees to engage in this process. Concerning the nomenclature of species listed in Appendix 3, paragraphs 45 to 48 summarize the deliberations on this matter, on which the views of the Standing Committee were sought. This led to a series of draft revisions to decisions 18.313 and 18.314, which can be found in Annex 1 to the present document. And finally, in the course of preparations and document review by the parties, a small number of additions and corrections have been brought to our attention. And these are noted in some detail in the addendum document that was made available on Monday and referred to by my botanical colleague. We thank our colleagues for drawing our attention to these matters, and we thank the Secretariat for their assistance processing these improvements. These concern some spelling corrections of scientific names, the addition of Paragalago granti and Brachypelma smithi to the list of species defined by new nomenclatural standard references, because these had accidentally been overlooked in Annex 3 of the main document, despite their inclusion in Annex 5. Also, we propose deletion of Psittacara X intermedia from the 2014 Del Hoyo and Collar reference, so that the adopted reference, Collar 1997, remains in force for this taxon. And it involves adding the applicable reference from 2017 for two Europlatus gecko species that were erroneously assigned to a 2015 reference. In summary, we concur with the Secretariat's recommendations as listed in paragraph O on page 15 of the present document, with the clarification that decisions 18.313 and 314 not be deleted, but replaced by the proposed revised version. We thank the Secretariat and all party, intergovernmental organization and non-governmental organization persons who provided extensive input on all nomenclature matters over the years since CoP18. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, nomenclature specialists of both the Plants and Animals Committees. And I'm very impressed that you were able to summarize. This is a very long and complex document that reflects an awful lot of work, and I'm very impressed that you were able to condense all that into such a succinct summary. So I'm very grateful to you both, and I'm sure the parties as a whole are very grateful for all your work in undertaking what is a very critical part of the work of this convention. So we've had this introduction. Parties have had a chance to consider the document. We'll try and do this in a way that gives you, or looks at this in sort of bite-sized chunks. So what we suggest is that we begin by looking at the draft revisions to the standard nomenclature references in Conference Resolution 1211. And in particular, we will begin with those proposed for flora in Annex 2 of document 84.1, including, of course, the corrections which are shown in the addendum to document 84.1. So with that focus, I will invite any comments from parties. And I will take silence as a consent that you're all happy. This has been a very thorough piece of work. I see the United States. Yes?
Our card doesn't seem to be working. He just fixed it for us. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah, I can see on my screen now. It didn't initially, and your microphone is lit up. So
yes. So
okay.
you're fine. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yes, we would like to start by saying that we applaud the efforts of the nomenclature specialists for flora and fauna for your leadership in bringing forward this very large program of work during this past intersession, given all of the challenges we faced. We also appreciate the work of the respective Animals and Plants Committee working groups who informed these issues with the capable support of the Secretariat. And we would like to, I guess we kind of had our intervention ready to take the whole shebang, but I'll go with just flora. So we support the recommendations outlined in this document, along with the draft decisions in Annex 1, and the amendment to Resolution COP 1211 as found in Annex 2 for flora. We also support the recommendations in the addendum to the document. We support the recommendations or comments made by the Secretariat with two exceptions, but one is for fauna, so if you want me to hold that, I will. Thank you. With respect to the amendments to the Dalbergia, with respect to the Dalbergia checklist, we'd like to suggest actually moving this in a different direction, and in fact, I apologize, but if I could possibly give the microphone to our colleagues in the United Kingdom. I got a bit flustered by the joint presentation of the documents, and I think our colleagues had an intervention to make on this regard. Thank you.
Oh, I can certainly do that, but I see your microphone is lit up, so can we give the floor to the United Kingdom? That they're not actually appearing on my screen. So UK, have you got? Yes, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and to the US for their comments. So the United Kingdom supports the draft decisions in Annex 1 and the revisions by the CITES Secretariat, along with the revisions presented in Annex 2. regarding the additional work identified by the Secretariat for the genus Dalbergia, noting page 13, paragraph D, point C and D, on the development and incorporation of wood identification features to the annotated checklist species profiles and the development of molecular tools for species-level identification of wood specimens of Dalbergia. We recognize this work is urgently needed, and we believe this aspect of Dalbergia work could continue under the identification of timber and other wood products work program. The reason we request this separation of nomenclature checklists and timber identification is to make implementation guides available to parties as soon as they are available, and not to be delayed awaiting formal adoption of standard nomenclature references at Conference of Parties. However, we hope that there remains close collaboration between the production of nomenclature checklists and identification tools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, UK. We were just checking here what changes that would actually make to draft decisions, and we think it doesn't require a change to the decisions, but it's something that we ought to note in the summary record so that that work can be taken forward on issues relating to timber or wood identification, and not just as an issue of standard nomenclature. So paragraph in comments from the Secretariat, paragraphs D, C, and D. So we'll make a record of that, and does that actually capture your point, UK or US, or did you want some changes in the actual decision? Is your microphone not working, or no? Okay, UK.
Thank you. The UK is happy with this way forward.
Okay, thank you for that. United States, did you want to speak, or you got the floor?
I'm sorry, yes. Sorry, I apologize. We did have a suggestion for a draft decision that could actually refer some work to the Timber ID Working Group, or to the work under timber identification. And as such, we would propose a new draft decision be considered under the agenda item CoP19 Doc 44.2 on identification of timber and other wood products. And for the ease of dealing with it under this document, with the idea that we'll discuss it, we could discuss it again under the other one, we would just call it new paragraph X, to prioritize input in the development of identification material for Dalbergia species, taking into consideration progress made in document PC 25, Doc 34, and the Dalbergia checklist as included in Resolution Conf 1211, Rev CoP19, and giving attention to frontline identification materials to assist differentiating lookalike species that may not be of conservation concern. So we think that this would be a good way to help loop in that other group that has been focused on timber identification. And that was actually the amendment that we wish to make for flora. We do have a comment on an item that spans fauna and flora, but we could wait if you prefer. Thank you.
So I think what we'll do with your draft new paragraph or a decision, it's linked to document 44.2. So I think if you give us the text for that draft decision now, we can include that in the summary record, and then when we get to document 44.2, then we have got the text there and we can makes it simpler to introduce at that stage. Yes? Okay, thank you. I see European Union requesting the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And first, I'd like to speak on behalf of the EU and its member states. And we'd like to thank the nomenclature specialists for their leadership in addressing this large amount of work accomplished in the intersessional period. I suppose speaking to the flora items online, maybe are we discussing the work plan as well? Or were you just discussing the...
Well, I'd originally suggested we were just discussing Annex 2, but we seem to have expanded a little.
Okay, so if you're happy...
If you could just keep comments to Annex 2 now, and then I'll maybe come back to the draft decisions later.
Okay, so just on the way forward, on that new draft decision and way forward suggested by the UK and the US, we could support that. Thank you.
I see Ethiopia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time Ethiopia takes floor in this Committee 1, we also join other parties and observers in extending our appreciation to the warm welcoming and hospitality of the people and the government of Panama. And also we congratulate you on your leadership as a chair of the Committee 1. Ethiopia wants to intervene for draft decision 19 ANS directed to the Animal Committee, Part A, to include...
Well, hold on, Ethiopia. You've got a decision related to the Animals Committee. I was going to come on to animals in a moment, so we could just try and wrap up. We're just trying to focus on Annex 2 on plants, flora at the moment. So when we come on to the animals and all the decisions, I'll make sure I give you the floor and take your intervention then. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So just trying to focus. I've not seen any comments or dissent in relation to Annex 2, including the amendments from the addendum document. Are there any observers who wish to comment on that? But I think if not, then we can take it that we are content with the changes in Annex 2. Sorry, Annex... Right, so talking Annex. Flora. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So we're talking about Annex 2 on flora, and I've not seen any dissent, so I think we can adopt that with all the changes. I'm now going to ask you to focus on the relevant annex for fauna, which I think is Annex 3, if I've got my papers correctly done. Yes? Yeah. Annex 3. So I open the floor for any comments on Annex 3, recognizing also that there are corrections which are contained within the addendum document as well. So the floor is open if there are any comments. And silence I will take as consent. United States.
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to Annex 3 and its addendum, we have just one observation, which is that there was the topic of a hybrid, which is referred to in the addendum as Citicula X intermedia, and it was our understanding that further discussion of that issue would occur in the next intersession because it turned out to be a little more complex than it seemed. So I would ask the nomenclature specialist for fauna to please clarify that. And then when the opportunity arises, we do have comments on the document as well. Thank you.
So does nomenclature, yeah, we could give the floor to the nomenclature specialist for fauna.
Thank you, Chair. I can reassure the United States that we have removed this particular species by way of the changes made in the addendum document, which means that the current standard reference for the species will remain in effect. So there's no change for the time being, and this will be taken up at the 32nd meeting of the Animals Committee and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you for that reassurance, nomenclature specialist for fauna. Are there any other comments on Annex 3? I don't see any, so I think we can agree that that is adopted with the corrections and amendments in the addendum document. So moving on from that, I will now suggest we look at the draft decisions which are in Annex 1, and I know some of you already kind of have some suggestions, and perhaps Ethiopia, as I interrupted you when you were about to start on your intervention, perhaps you could take the floor now. So Ethiopia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So Ethiopia recommends with regard to draft decision 19 Annex 5, directed to the Animal Committee, Part A, to include the IUCN Special Survival Commission African Elephant Specialist Group as a primary stakeholder to be consulted for expert inputs and opinion during the implementation of the decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ethiopia. We understand your intent, but could you be more specific about exactly where you would insert this reference? So we're talking about decision 19A and 4, and obviously there are 4 parts to that. So if you could tell us precisely where you would want your text to go, that would be helpful. Thank you. AN 5, I beg your pardon.
So we just suggested this change so that the IUCN application of the best available science and the data to this question is incorporated. So we are just recommending under Part A, the IUCN and the Special Survival Commissions, the African Elephant Special Group, to be added as a primary stakeholder for consultation. Thank
you. Thank you, Ethiopia. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong decision there. So maybe what we can suggest to capture your wording is the Animals Committee shall, in paragraph A, in consultation with the IUCN African Elephant Specialist Group, comma, review the taxonomic nomenclature history of African elephant. Would that capture your intent?
Yeah, exactly. That's
okay. Thank you. Ethiopia. I'll just make sure I've got a note of that. Right, so we are looking at all the decisions in Annex 1. Are there any other comments from parties, or I see none? Any from observers? See the screen's flickering around a bit. So I see the United States, and then IUCN, I also see you too. You have the floor. No?
Thank you, Chair. I apologize, but I just wasn't clear if you were closing discussion of the document or just that one annex. Thank you. Then I'll wait. Apologies.
I now have the European Union, then, well, IUCN are on my list because I'd opened the floor to observers, but I will take parties first, of course. So European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the European Union and its member states, I would like to say under Annex 1, with regard to standard nomenclature for Appendix 3 species, in the outlining work plan on page 5 of the document, we note that the investigation of the nomenclature for the taxon Dipteryx panamensis, which is currently listed in Appendix 3, is proposed for inclusion in the work plan for the next intersessional period in paragraph 16, page 5 of the document. But we consider that this may need to be resolved as a matter of urgency should proposal CoP19, proposal 48, to include Dipteryx species in Appendix 2 be adopted, as the nomenclature in the proposal does not recognize this taxon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, EU. That is a change which is obviously dependent upon a listing proposal, and perhaps that's something that can be considered when we actually get to that proposal, and and would be addressed, would it not, by document 84.2, rather than needing something inserted here? So are you content with that? There is document 84.2, so EU, you have the floor.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just once it's dealt with, and we highlight that to you. Thank you.
Helps if I put the microphone on. So we note that comment, and clearly we will get onto that document and the listing proposal, hopefully in the near future. So I now see IUCN. So IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us this opportunity to comment on document 84.1. On behalf of the IUCN, we suggest the following additions to the proposed decision 19AN4 that is directed to the Secretariat. So in Part A, add, and in particular, parties that are African elephant range states. And in Part C, add, summarize patterns apparent in the responses of parties that are African elephant range states. And also in Part C, add, and collate, review, and summarize apparent benefits and drawbacks with respect to CITES' aim to ensure that international trade in specimens of wild animals does not threaten the survival of the species when considering the existence of 2 African elephant species. We suggest these changes to ensure that African elephant range states' perspectives are given appropriate attention and weight, considering that potential impacts, whether positive for species-specific conservation or management purposes, or burdensome in terms of legislative, regulatory, administrative, or enforcement impacts, will likely be experienced by them to a greater degree than other parties. We also suggest these changes with the hope that the long-term positive impacts are identified, included, and not overshadowed in the Secretariat's review by shorter-term administrative burdens that may occur if CITES were to recognize 2 African elephant species in the future. The IUCN is available to support the work of parties who have a need to confirm elephant species identification at sites within their borders and to provide other technical support relating to issues they may experience when preparing for a potential future situation in which CITES recognizes 2 African elephant species. Thank you.
Thank you, IUCN. I may need to ask you to repeat those suggested amendments again, but it would be useful to hear if those are supported by parties, or if parties have any view on the suggested changes. I don't see any requests for the floor, so without some support from parties, I can't really sort of propose those as a way forward, I'm afraid. All right. And I don't see any more requests for the floor at all, so I think Annex 1. I see one other observer requesting the floor, so Traffic, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Chair. We would strongly support developing recommendations by the Secretariat to renew Decision 18309 and 18310 on the use of time-specific online databases as standard nomenclature references. We would like to highlight the need to maintain time-stamped versions that include both listed and unlisted species, as this can be important when understanding the implications of taxonomic changes and intentions of listing proposals at the time they were adopted. This became relevant when looking at the proposal to list the Agalignis lemur, Proposal 35. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Traffic. Just give me a moment, please. Right, so just to conclude, we've been through Annex 2 and Annex 3 and have adopted those already. We have been through the draft decisions, and with some minor amendments, we have adopted those as a recommendation. The nomenclature specialists in the introduction supported the inclusion of Secretariat's recommendations in paragraph O of the document, which is on page 15 of the English version. And we've just heard from Traffic about their views on retaining decisions on, or renewing decisions on the use of time-specific versions of online databases. So I ask the views of parties whether there are any further comments or support for Secretariat recommendations in paragraph O. So I open the floor. And I see United States. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope this is in paragraph O. First of all, I would say that we do support the continuation of the time-stamped version decisions, which I thought was a part of the recommendations of the document, but just in case, we do support that. And with regard to the recommendations of the Secretariat, I suppose we have just one comment as it relates to the first workshop on governance of taxonomic lists. So we would support a revision to this decision because we understand that it's important for the Animals and Plants Committee to stay apprised of this work, to understand how it may or may not impact or be of value to CITES. But we're not certain that there will be a value and benefit, and so we'd like to add just a subparagraph to allow contemplation of that matter within the committees. And so we would add to the draft amendment 19AA. I'm sorry, again, we normally do provide our interventions in advance, and I apologize. I think we would have to, we'd have to create a subparagraph A and it would say, subject to external funding, the Animals and Plants Committee shall, through their respective specialists, and then it would be subparagraph I, and I'd be, like I said, I'll be happy to provide this and we can fix that. Participate in the initiative, it would stay the same, of the International Union of Biological Sciences to develop a standardized global, and I would underline the word checklist, that was missing from, I think, the decision, of species. Little double I would be the new language, report progress on such participation at each of the meetings of the committees, and Roman numeral 3, draft a report for the committee consideration at its final intersessional meeting, providing views on the prospective value and benefit and the potential limitations of participating in such effort as it relates to improving CITES implementation, taking into consideration the specific aspects of Resolution Conf 1211, particularly paragraphs 2, 3, and especially 3B, 7, 8, among others. And then we would continue with little b, report on progress to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties as appropriate. So I'd be happy to repeat that. Thank you.
Yeah, so in discussion here, one of the things that we're commenting on is that this decision is directed to the Animals and Plants Committee, and therefore you're asking the Animals and Plants Committee to kind of report to themselves. So it perhaps seems a little circular, but do you still feel it is necessary, essential?
So I think the issue is that it says through the respective chairs, and we do just want to make sure that it comes back to the committees for consideration and input before anything is submitted for further reference. So if we can note for the record that we think that the committees do need to inform any recommendations or reports submitted to the Conference of the Parties then that would be fine with us. And then I would just mention, if I may, that on the work plan, while it's not required for the committee or for the parties to endorse or approve the specialist work plan, we do appreciate the advanced development of such. We would note, and we do agree with the Secretariat's observation, that additional issues may be referred to them after this meeting, but we would also like to note that additional matters may be brought forward during the intersession, which may be incorporated into the work plan as per Res Conf 1211, paragraph 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, United States, and thank you for your flexibility, and certainly we can kind of note those in the summary record so that they're available for the chairs and committees, respective committees, to take into account. So just one moment while I check where I am with this range of recommendations. I think we're nearly there. Okay, so I think we're nearly there. I think we just need to record for the record that you did insert the word checklist into Decision 19AA, United States, and that will be incorporated. But otherwise, the draft Decision 19AA in paragraph M, we would leave as is with your note for the summary record. Looking at the remainder of paragraph O, there hasn't been any comment on the nomenclature and identification of corals and the suggestion to retain those. I can take your silence as consent if you're willing to do that. So unless I hear an objection, we will roll those forward. And then finally, I think the final things we need to do on this particular agenda item are to delete decisions 17.312, 18.315, and I think that is it, yes. So unless there's further comments, I think we can close this agenda item. And again, I would thank you all for your input to this, and again, thank the nomenclature specialists of both committees for the enormous amount of work that goes into this task. So thank you very much. So I'll just check on time. So continuing with our agenda, we will now shift into a different agenda item and begin our consideration of proposals for the amendment of the appendices. And in the working program, The first proposal that comes up is Proposal 48, which in summary is to include dipterate species in Appendix 2 with an annotation. But I won't go into the details of the proposal. The proponents are Colombia, the European Union, and Panama. And I would invite one of those to introduce the proposal in full. So with Proposal 48, I see Panama requesting the floor, so the floor is yours.
Gracias, señor presidente. Buenas tardes y una vez más, bienvenidos a Panamá. A nombre de los países proponentes, Colombia, Panamá y la Unión Europea, se presenta la propuesta 48, Cumarú, almendro de montaña, Dipteryx spp. Nueva notación designando trozas, madera cerrada, láminas de chapa de madera, madera contrachapada, madera transformada y semillas. Incluir las especies Dipteryx alata, Dipteryx migranta, Dipteryx odorata, Dipteryx oleifera en el apéndice 2 de las CITES, de conformidad con el artículo 2, párrafo A, de la Convención. Estas 4 especies cumplen con el criterio B del anexo 2A de la resolución CONF 9.24 REF COP17. Incluir el resto de las especies del género Dipteryx por su semejanza cumplen con el criterio A del anexo 2B de la resolución CONF número 9.24 REF COP17. Dipteryx es un género taxonómicamente complejo que abarca 14 especies reconocidas actualmente, distribuidas en América Central y del Sur, especies de árboles grandes, emergentes y de lento crecimiento. El género es explotado por su valiosa madera dura, densa y resistente. Se comercializa con nombres comunes como cumarú, chihuahuaco, charapilla, almendro y almendrillo. Las especies Dipteryx se encuentran en selvas tropicales, bosques estacionalmente secos, superficies forestales, sabanas, bosques de montaña, llanuras aluviales, bosques antiguos en la cuenca del Amazonas. En su comercio, Bolivia exportó 3.5 millones de kilogramos de cumarú a la Unión Europea en el 2019. El género Dipteryx representó el 80% de todas las exportaciones de madera procedentes de Perú en el 2015. En el comercio internacional, entre 2018 y 2021, los Estados Unidos y la Unión Europea importaron 11 millones de kilogramos y alrededor de 7 millones de kilogramos de madera de cumarú de Brasil. Perú exportó entre 2018 a 2021 más de 82 millones de kilogramos, con 51 millones de kilogramos destinados a China, 19 millones de kilogramos a la Unión Europea y 1.8 millones de kilogramos a los Estados Unidos. Colombia exportó entre 2019, 2020 y 2021 343 metros cúbicos de varias especies de Dipteryx, la mayoría con destino a Vietnam. Los mayores importadores son Estados Unidos, la Unión Europea, China y Vietnam. Existe comercio ilícito con Dipteryx. Por ejemplo, en 2021 Forest Trends consideró que todas las especies de madera de bosques nativos de Brasil, Colombia y Perú, incluido el Dipteryx, corren un alto riesgo de explotación ilegal. Global Witness en 2019 señaló que el 60% de la madera inspeccionada entre 2008 y 2018 por el organismo supervisor de los recursos forestales y de la fauna silvestre de Perú tenían origen ilegal. Brasil, Colombia, Perú y Bolivia son grandes exportadores de la madera Dipteryx. Las especies de Dipteryx se enfrentan a la deforestación, extracción selectiva, comercio internacional, degradación del hábitat en toda su área de distribución mundial. La tala aumenta considerablemente la presión sobre las poblaciones silvestres. y la reducción de la regeneración de las poblaciones de Dipteryx spp. Dipteryx alata fue reevaluada globalmente vulnerable en la lista roja de la UICN en 2017, sobre la base de la disminución sustancial de la población causada por la pérdida del hábitat y el aislamiento genético asociado con las subpoblaciones, así como la cosecha de madera. Se consideró que las poblaciones de Dipteryx odorata y Dipteryx micrantha están en declive, ya que la tala selectiva suponía amenaza importante y el lento crecimiento intrínseco de la especie impedía la regeneración tras la tala. Dipteryx odorata y Dipteryx micrantha fueron consideradas de especies de alto riesgo que se enfrentan a la recolección ilegal y o insostenible en Perú y Bolivia. Su rol es de suma importancia en el equilibrio dinámico dentro del ecosistema, ya que son importantes fuentes de alimento para mamíferos, aves e insectos, proporcionando estas especies lugares de nidificación para aves en peligro de extinción. Las Dipteryx spp también desempeñan un papel importante en la mitigación del cambio climático, debido a su alta densidad forestal y a su capacidad de almacenamiento de carbono. Distinguidos delegados, contamos con su apoyo para la protección de la especie clave de los bosques tropicales, para así mantener su comercio lícito, sostenible y trazable. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Panama, for your introduction. So I now open the floor for comments from parties, and I see Brazil, followed by Colombia, then Suriname. So Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor. The proposal now under consideration by this committee raises serious concerns for Brazil as the country with the largest population of the genus Dipteryx. From the outset, it's worth highlighting that Brazil has maintained the firm commitment to implementing CITES through decisions based on updated scientific studies and not on allegations and conjectures based on insufficient data. However, when we look at Proposal 48, it is our understanding that robust scientific data justifying the submission of the species to the protective regime under CITES Appendix 2 is absent. The lack of sufficient data has been noted by the Secretariat, who recognized that, and I quote, little specific information is available on the status of the species purported to satisfy criterion B of Annex 2A of Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev CoP19, end quote. In the same way, the International Timber Trade Organization pointed out that, and I quote again, more justification for the genus level listing to include all species beyond the 4 target species should be provided, including country experiences in identifying different species in the genus. It's clear, therefore, that there are still many doubts and data gaps in the proposal. Moreover, the insufficient scientific information does not allow concluding that the genus is or may be threatened with extinction. And it could not be different since in Brazil, and allow me to say it again, the country with the biggest population of Dipteryx, the most recent studies and analysis carried out by renowned institutions like the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation, Embrapa, did not find any current risk for the populations that are commercially exploited in the country. This is even more evident when we observe that the last update of our official list of species, and the Brazilian official list of species of flora threatened with extinction, carried out in June of the current year, did not include any species of this genus. Therefore, in our view, the approval of Proposal 48 would imply the loosening of the criteria for inclusion of species in the appendices of CITES, weakening the mechanisms for implementing the Convention's goals. Consequently, it would also set a dangerous precedent for the Convention, harming all parties who could face undue and scientifically unfounded restrictions on their international trade. Mr. Chairman, there's another fundamental reason indicating that the proposal does not meet the criteria for inclusion on Appendix 2. Trade is not contributing to the decline of dipteryx population, quite the opposite. In Brazil, virtually all production of timber intended for foreign markets comes from sustainable exploitation practices perfectly aligned with the concept of the sustainable use of biodiversity. It is possible to assure in volumetric terms that 87% of timber production in Brazil comes from sustainable forest management plans. When it comes to dipteryx, the figures show that 95% of the production of timber comes from sustainable forest management plans approved and inspected by the Brazilian government. The implementation of sustainable management plans only allows for the extraction of specific trees with the conservation of about 88% of all existing trees in the area being explored. Therefore, this does not involve removing the forest or any other type of changing soil use that could compromise the survival of existing species. On the contrary, the various management categories constitute important tools for maintaining the standing forest, in addition to providing countless possibilities for conservation and sustainable use. Thus, the inclusion in Appendix 2 of species proven not to be endangered in the Brazilian territory may render the implementation of sustainable forest management less attractive. This, in turn, could cause the abandon of forest areas, which may be converted to other types of use that could constitute a threat to the survival of flora species, including those mentioned in Proposal 48. The proposal then would have the strict opposite effect to that desired, bringing about risk for the species that it intends to protect. We should not ignore the fact that sustainable management practices are essential to ensure the livelihood of traditional peoples who inhabited the forest, decisively contributing to the perpetuation of their traditional knowledge. This is the case, for instance, with the collection of dipteric seeds, or tonka beans, an activity that is manually carried out up until the export stage by indigenous peoples and local communities living in the areas where they occur. Therefore, should the Proposal 48 be approved by this Conference of the Parties, there would be significant social and economic harm, especially to vulnerable and needy populations, what would be fully inconsistent with the policy of engaging indigenous peoples and local communities in CITES implementation processes, as suggested in document 13. Another important aspect to be mentioned is that the information control and management systems for the tropical wood production chain in Brazil can be considered to be among the most comprehensive and robust in the world, ensuring that the entire authorization process is digital, with clear characterization of the exploration project and traceable controls for manufacturer and domestic and international trade. The CINAFOR platform, under the coordination, supervision, and regulation of the Brazilian CITES Management Authority, IBAMA, is a completely digital licensing process that can be audited at all stages of the production and trading chain for forest products. Based on these mechanisms, the Brazilian authorities are able to supervise in an extremely effective way the sustainability of almost all exported wood cargo loads, with a broad vision of the entire chain of custody, including origin, manufacture, and commercialization. Moreover, IBAMA is well equipped to identify these species through macroscopic laboratory tests, using the interactive wood identification key, a tool that was developed in partnership with the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization to strengthen CITES implementation in the region. Finally, we must take into account the impact that the approval of such proposal would have on the activities of our CITES authorities. We can anticipate, in this case, a significant increase in demands on Brazil's bureaucratic structure that would divert efforts and resources otherwise focused on species that are effectively under some threat of extinction. Brazil is aware that the sustainable management of forest resources, including dipterics, may not be the reality in all countries where the genus occurs. Our country is ready to share its experience and good practices in this regard. We are also open to develop further studies in collaboration with other ranger states that could provide solid scientific data on the status of this species. We cannot admit, however, that our model of sustainable use of natural resources be penalized by the adoption of unjustified restrictions to our trade. For all these reasons, we invite parties to oppose this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So on the list, I do note I've got Colombia and the European Union on the list, and I will give you the floor. But we already had a fairly long introduction to the proposal from Panama. So for now, I'll just give the floor to some other parties that we've not heard from just now. So I'll give the floor to Suriname, followed by Bolivia, and then Peru, and come back to Colombia and the European Union later. So Suriname, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Since this is the first time Suriname is taking the stage, I want to congratulate you on your election for this committee. And I want to also thank Panama for having us in this great event. Since 1947, the Dipteris adorata is a protected tree species in Suriname. The justification of this protection is based on the use of the seeds of this species. The seeds and as well the extraction from the seeds are being used for traditional, cultural, and medical means. There is an important export market of products obtained from these seeds to Surinamese and diaspora living abroad. Because of this reason, we are suggesting to withdraw the seeds from the proposal, otherwise it will bring a lot of administrative burden to the common citizens of our country. We are thanking you for taking the position of Suriname into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Suriname. So I'll give the floor to Bolivia, then Peru, and then Colombia.
Muchas gracias. Primeramente, saludar al directorio de CITES y al gobierno panameño por acogernos en esta hermosa ciudad y esta magnífica organización. Bolivia quiere manifestar que no está de acuerdo en la inclusión al apéndice 2 del género Dipteri odorata, primeramente porque falta sustento técnico y científico y no reflejan la realidad del comportamiento de este género en el Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia. Bolivia apuesta a la conservación de los bosques bajo sistemas sostenibles de manejo forestal. Tenemos 10.800.000 hectáreas de bosque, de los cuales muchos de ellos han sido supervisados por la certificación forestal FSC. De esos 10 millones, más de 6 millones de hectáreas de bosque están bajo la administración de 85.000 familias de pueblos originarios, que perdería valor estos bosques económicos si ellos no les compran el Dipteri odorata, que es una de las principales especies de valor comercial en estos bosques. Por tal motivo, solicitamos que no se incluya en este apéndice 2 al género Dipteri odorata. También el comportamiento de esta especie en estudios de Bolivia, que tiene bastante información, ustedes mismos en las proposiciones se admite falta de información. Bolivia tiene información generada a través de la promulgación de su ley forestal el año 1996. Tiene 2 inventarios nacionales en más de 3.5 millones de hectáreas que han sido inventariadas sistemáticamente. Y los resultados nos muestran que Dipteri odorata no tiene problemas de población ni comportamiento en su estructura horizontal, ni distribución potencial. Por tal motivo, pedimos que no se incorpore al apéndice mientras se tengan mayores datos técnicos que permitan tomar una decisión responsable e informada. Gracias.
Thank you, Bolivia. I'll now give the floor to Peru, followed by Colombia and the European Union. Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente. El Perú, como país megadiverso, está comprometido con la conservación de los bosques y con la promoción del aprovechamiento sostenible de sus recursos, viendo a la diversidad biológica como una oportunidad y un activo para el desarrollo sostenible en beneficio de las poblaciones locales, quienes son los principales aliados para la conservación. A la fecha, de acuerdo con los estudios de diversidad genética realizados por el Instituto de Investigación de la Amazonía Peruana, se han registrado 3 especies de Dipteryx sp. Dipteryx micrantha en los departamentos de Madre de Dios, Ucayali y San Martín, Dipteryx férrea en los departamentos de Loreto, Ucayali y Madre de Dios, y Dipteryx charapilla en el departamento de Loreto. Todas estas especies son conocidas como chihuahuaco o charapilla. Este grupo de especies son difíciles de diferenciar a nivel dendrológico y anatómico, siendo las especies más aprovechadas actualmente por la industria forestal y las más importantes en volumen y valor en las exportaciones, las mismas que se han incrementado en los últimos años. Es importante señalar que en el proceso de categorización nacional de especies bajo algún grado de amenaza que se tiene en marcha, las poblaciones naturales de la especie Dipteryx micrantha se sitúan en una posición de vulnerabilidad o de preocupación menor bajo los criterios de la USN, considerando la reducción del área de ocupación y extensión, así como respecto a las densidades nacionales observadas en los inventarios y datos de los censos comerciales de los planes generales de manejo forestal. Asimismo, deseamos compartir que existen nuevas reservas de poblaciones en áreas bajo esquemas de conservación, como por ejemplo las áreas naturales protegidas por el Estado, bosques certificados por FSC y áreas de manejo forestal que son monitoreadas por las autoridades forestales subnacionales y el organismo de supervisión de los recursos forestales y de fauna silvestre. Ante la probable inclusión del género Dipteryx en el apéndice 2 de las CITES, esto demandaría al Estado peruano, según la Ley Forestal y de Fauna Silvestre, a que la autoridad administrativa CITES realice una verificación ocular en campo de los árboles declarados, previo a la aprobación del Plan de Manejo Forestal y a la emisión de un dictamen de extracción no perjudicial por parte de la autoridad científica CITES, lo que implicaría también la evaluación en campo de las poblaciones. Adicionalmente, el organismo de supervisión forestal y de fauna silvestre tendrá que verificar en campo los árboles aprovechados, conllevando ello a un despliegue de recursos, personal, logísticos y presupuestales, y de tiempo para asegurar una progresiva y adecuada implementación. Cabe señalar que la inclusión de especies forestales maderables en los apéndices de CITES que se han venido realizando en los últimos años, muchas veces no tienen en consideración los desafíos que enfrentan las partes, por lo que un plazo razonable para la entrada en vigor es necesario. Asimismo, esto debería estar vinculado con proyectos de apoyo técnico y financiero que aseguren la movilización de recursos que refuercen el trabajo de las partes. Por lo expuesto, en un escenario de aprobación de la inclusión, recomendamos a los proponentes considerar un plazo de entrada en vigor de 24 meses que permita a las partes adoptar las medidas y acciones necesarias. Respecto a la anotación, apoyamos la propuesta realizada por Surinam y se recomienda no considerar a las semillas como parte de la anotación, dado que el comercio de ellas no es significativo para todas las especies y podría desincentivar el manejo integrado que se da en los ecosistemas forestales, limitando los medios de subsistencia para las comunidades y poblaciones locales. Asimismo, será importante contar con el apoyo de la cooperación internacional para asegurar la movilización de recursos que permita el cierre de brechas en torno a los aspectos científicos, estudios poblacionales y herramientas de identificación, y para llevar a cabo medidas que refuercen la trazabilidad y el seguimiento a los planes de manejo, reforzando las prácticas silviculturales para el aprovechamiento sostenible. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Peru. And I think you have introduced there two substantive amendments, haven't you? You're proposing that there is a 24-month delay if this proposal was adopted, and you're also formally proposing the removal of seeds from the annotation, which would then make it compatible with annotation 17, if I remember correctly. And that, of course, would narrow the scope or reduce the scope of the proposal, so it is admissible, and clearly we can allow that into the debate. So I only have two other parties requesting the floor. So Colombia and the European Union, who are both proponents, perhaps in your... Oh, there's a third. Oh, right. We've got a third blank row again. Oh. Right. So we've got the United Kingdom, but there's a row which, if the technicians can look at it, is showing up, but without any name in it. So continuing, giving the opportunity to non-proponents to speak before coming back to co-proponents. I will give the floor to the United Kingdom, but it would help if we could also resolve this blank row. So UK, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We thank Colombia, the European Union and its member states and Panama for this proposal. We recognise several species of Dipteryx are in trade, and there is evidence that Dipteryx elata meets criterion B of Annex 2A of Res Conf 9.24. Due to the uncertainty of similarity of species and timber identification, the genus appears to meet the criterion A of Annex 2B. However, we consider that there is insufficient evidence to support the harvesting and trade of tonka beans is negatively impacting Dipteryx species. This includes a lack of scientific research into the impacts of current seed harvesting practices upon the regeneration of wild populations, while initiatives based on seed collection that reportedly encourage the sustainable management of Dipteryx populations could also be more fully evaluated. Therefore, the United Kingdom supports this genus listing, but requests that it go forward without the inclusion of seeds under annotation 17, as suggested by Suriname. We have heard the suggestion by Peru to delay the implementation of this listing by 24 months, but the UK does not support a delay of this length. We do not consider that this would be in the interests of the conservation of Dipteryx and may create an incentive to harvest large amounts of Dipteryx from the wild in order to create pre-convention stockpiles. Therefore, the UK supports the inclusion of Dipteryx in Appendix 2 with annotation 17 within the usual 90-day implementation window. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. I'll give the floor to Senegal, and then I will genuinely come to Colombia and the European Union. So, Senegal, you have the floor.
Voilà, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Donc, on se réjouit par rapport à ces propositions que nous avons eu à prendre connaissance, donc qui invitent toujours à bien suivre l'exploitation commerciale d'une espèce, qui est le Dipteryx. Donc, je pense que l'inscription en annexe 2 n'est pas une restriction. Ça permet tout simplement de suivre correctement la ressource à l'exportation en ayant sur place des paramètres qui nous permettent de contrôler la survie de l'espèce à l'état sauvage. Donc le Sénégal est très favorable à cette proposition, mais aussi invite que les gens prennent en charge l'annotation 17, qui permet d'utiliser aussi certaines parties pour les autres utilisations. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to Colombia, followed by the European Union.
Gracias, señor presidente. Colombia, como país coproponente, agradece la oportunidad del uso de la palabra y contribuir con el análisis de un grupo de especies como es el del género Dipteryx. Pese a que esta es la primera vez que una propuesta para todo el género es sometido para su inclusión en el apéndice 2 de las CITES, ya existen antecedentes de inclusión en el apéndice 3, lo que hace visible una necesidad por documentar y contar con el apoyo de las partes para su regulación. La información basada en las características intrínsecas de vulnerabilidad y los datos documentados sobre incremento de volúmenes de aprovechamiento y comercialización de las especies, como es el caso en Colombia de Dipteris olífera, que han sido claramente documentados, cumplen con los criterios establecidos en la resolución 924 para enmendar los apéndices de la Convención, lo que hace evidente y necesario avanzar en su gestión y proponer aquí su inclusión en el apéndice 2. Agradecemos a nuestros coproponentes y como país de distribución reconocemos los retos que la implementación representa a todas las autoridades, como lo ha mencionado Perú, las autoridades administrativas y las autoridades científicas, desde el fortalecimiento de capacidades y la generación de información que soporta un uso legal, sostenible y trazable, por lo que consideramos viable una consideración del plazo de entrada en vigor, lo cual contribuirá a poner en marcha los procesos tanto de generación de información como cuestiones administrativas. Seguimos invitando a todas las partes a considerar apoyar la propuesta de inclusión del género Dipteryx como un siguiente paso a fortalecer los procesos hacia el uso sostenible. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. Colombia, I give the floor to the European Union. So you have the floor, and as a co-proponent, you might also want to reflect on the debate that you've heard here today. EU?
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We thank Panama for the excellent introduction of this proposal and together with Colombia for the excellent collaboration on it. There is no need, I think, to stress that we are convinced that the listing criteria are met. And maybe I will not reiterate everything. Instead, I try to respond to some of the reactions we have heard from parties here, and I'm very thankful for this. We believe that Dipteryx timbers are found to be in a high global demand, are therefore traded in huge volumes, and currently they are amongst the most expensive timbers in global demand. And we don't believe that this is a reason not to list a species, but rather to have concerns enlisted. We have also heard that the Secretariat has, in its assessment, have found that there is a lack of data, but we would invite everybody to look into the final conclusion of the Secretariat, which came to the conclusion that the listing criteria are met, and they recommend the adoption of the proposal. In addition, what we have heard is there were concerns about the seeds, and I want to say that in the proposal, if you read it, you can read that we included the seeds for precautionary reasons, and in the consultation process, we have asked range states for response on this. We didn't receive some. We haven't received any indication today that international trade in seeds is a problem to the species. So I think we are open to delete seeds from the proposed annotation, which would result in annotation 17 then. Regarding the delayed implementation, we have heard concerns from Peru, and we agree and understand that the implementation of such a listing, would it be adopted, would mean quite some work. So, but we have also heard from the UK that they wouldn't like to see it delayed. So maybe something in between we could go with to facilitate the needs of range states. We propose 1 year delay. So So I think I've responded to the major points. I would like to finalize my statement with that we invite, of course, parties to support the proposal with the amendments we have heard right now, and to list all species of the genera Dipteryx with annotation 17 on Appendix 2 of the Convention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. I see Guyana. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since it's the first time Guyana is taking the floor, I wish to congratulate you on your nomination as Chair, and also wish to extend thanks to Panama for being such a gracious host. Guyana does not support this proposal since it is in Guyana there is Dipteryx odorata, and even though it is not being harvested or exported extensively, listing it in Appendix 2 could very well diminish interest in buyers and increase the pressure on other prime species. Guyana is committed to ensuring the species is not harvested unsustainably, and for those reasons, Guyana cannot support this proposal.
That was a bit of a surprise, but I assume you had concluded your intervention, Guyana. But you can have the floor again if you hadn't.
Yes, I had concluded.
Thank you. I have no further requests from parties for the floor, so I will invite any interventions from observers. I see. Let's wait and see how many come in. So I would invite WWF. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Como esta es la primera vez que WWF interviene en el Comité 1, deseamos unirnos a otros para agradecer al Gobierno de Panamá por su cálida bienvenida y a la Secretaría por el arduo trabajo preparando esta reunión. Además, señor Presidente, queremos felicitarlo por su elección. Esta intervención se realiza en nombre del Centro de Derecho Internacional, la Agencia de Investigación Ambiental, la Red de Supervivencia de Especies, Defenders of Wildlife y WWF. Agradecemos grandemente a Colombia, la Unión Europea y el país anfitrión, Panamá, por presentar esta propuesta. Dado que las especies del género Dipteryx tienen un crecimiento intrínsecamente muy lento, pues se estima que tardan entre 47 y 177 años en alcanzar los 30 centímetros de diámetro a la altura del pecho, la extracción selectiva de grandes árboles semilleros supone una gran amenaza para la regeneración de la población. La madera de varias especies tiene una gran demanda debido a su consistencia densa y dura, y esto ha fomentado la tala en bosques fuera de las zonas de producción de madera, causando una importante degradación del ecosistema. Estos árboles son hábitat de especies en peligro de extinción como guacamayos y águilas arpías, que dependen de ellos para encontrar sitios de anidación adecuados. Hemos sido espectadores en el desarrollo de esta propuesta desde su inicio y podemos decir con confianza que han sido bien investigadas y minuciosamente revisadas por pares. Esto se refleja en la presentación del documento 84.2 sobre la nomenclatura dentro del género Dipteryx, que aborda lo que ha resultado ser uno de los aspectos más complicados de la propuesta. Aparte de este tema, son pocas las preocupaciones expresadas cuestionando los méritos del caso para la inclusión en el apéndice 2 de Dipteryx alata, micranta, odorata y oleífera, bajo el anexo 2A de la resolución de la conferencia 9.24 Rep CoP17, es decir, por razones de conservación sustantivas, con el resto del género calificando para su inclusión en el anexo 2B de esa resolución por razones de semejanza. Más bien, las principales objeciones a la propuesta se centran en la inclusión de semillas dentro del alcance de la lista. Entendemos la razón de esto y habiendo escuchado de una variedad de partes interesadas, aceptamos que presentaría dificultades, pero sin embargo creemos que este tema no debe ser obstáculo para listar una especie que se valora sobre todo por su madera, por lo que nos conformamos con que se eliminen las semillas de la anotación. También reconocemos que algunos países del área de distribución y consumidores tienen preocupaciones sobre los aspectos prácticos de la implementación de la inclusión y ahora se ha propuesto un retraso de 12 meses o 24 meses. Sobre este punto tenemos que ser francos y decir que preferiríamos que no hubiera retraso y ciertamente destacaríamos la necesidad de monitorear los patrones comerciales durante el periodo de retraso, pero apoyamos la propuesta incluso con este elemento.
So, WWF, could you please conclude?
Yes.
Where time is limited.
Por lo tanto, instamos a las partes a apoyar la propuesta y asegurar el futuro de estos magníficos árboles que juegan un papel tan crucial en sus ecosistemas y en la cultura local. Gracias.
Thank you. I have two observers on my list, which I'll give the floor to, and then no others, because we want to bring this to a conclusion before we close. So I will go now to the International Wood Products Association, and then traffic. So please be as brief as you can.
Thank you. As this is our first time speaking before the committee, I would like to join others in thanking Panama for hosting us so graciously and congratulating the chair on his election. I'm making this intervention on behalf of the International Wood Products Association, which represents hundreds of member companies around the world committed to the sustainable sourcing of wood. We are concerned that Proposition 48 does not meet the standard for inclusion in CITES Appendix 2, namely that it cannot be known or inferred or projected that regulation of trade in the species is required to ensure that the harvest of specimens from the wild is not reducing the wild population to a level at which its survival might be threatened by continued harvesting or other influences. We ask that parties consider both the positions of multiple primary exporting parties, including Brazil, Bolivia, and Guyana, who have already spoken so eloquently, which have to date not indicated support for the proposal, as well as the impacts this decision could have on domestic communities, many of them indigenous, in range countries engaged in the sustainable harvest of the species. It's also worth noting that importers in the United States and the European Union, which are the primary export markets for this product, comply with robust laws and enforcement with regards to the importation of timber already. In summary, IWPA does not believe that this proposal should be advanced and would request a vote of no from the parties. If, however, it is adopted, IWPA would strongly recommend a longer implementation period of 24 months, as suggested by Peru, as this will have significant impacts on trade and on the regulatory authorities tasked with implementation. Thank you for allowing us to voice our concerns.
Thank you, International Wood Products Association. I'll give the floor to traffic, and again with a request to be very brief. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Esta es una intervención conjunta de parte de Traffic y la UICN. De acuerdo con nuestro análisis, la principal amenaza identificada para las especies de Dipteryx es la tala para obtener madera y el comercio internacional de estas parece estar aumentando. Dipteryx alata parece cumplir con el criterio B del anexo 2A de la resolución 924, sobre la base de las disminuciones actuales e históricas de más del 30% durante 3 generaciones impulsadas por la deforestación. Varias especies de Dipteryx se comercializan bajo los nombres comunes de cumarú o chihuahuaco y no se pueden distinguir ni identificar a nivel de especies en el comercio. 2 especies, Dipteryx elata y Dipteryx odorata, son comúnmente confundidas con especies de Androanthus, tabebuya y Rosodendron, que se proponen para su inclusión en la propuesta 44. Por lo tanto, si se aceptara esa propuesta, también cumplirían el criterio de especies semejantes. Traffic y la UICN, al igual que Surinam y otras partes, consideran que la anotación 17, que no incluye las semillas, puede ser más apropiada para estas especies hasta que se cuente con más información e investigación sobre las semillas en el comercio internacional y se desarrollen estrategias para mitigar los impactos negativos potenciales sobre los medios de subsistencia y sus consecuencias sobre la conservación de la cobertura forestal, de acuerdo con la resolución 16.6 sobre las CITES y los medios de subsistencia. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Traffic. And that concludes our request from the floor for interventions. So I've listened to the debate carefully. Sorry, I see, is that Brazil? Yes? Do you request the floor again? If you can make it very, very brief, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick reaction. We do recognize that the Secretariat recommended the adoption of the proposal, and we were surprised by this, since its own assessment also recognized that there is little information available on the species that supposedly fulfill the requirements to satisfy criterion B of Annex 2A of Resolution Count 9.24 that would justify the adoption of the entire proposal. And I also would like to add that our trade is made with the scientific name of the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Your comments noted. So where are we? Well, I certainly haven't heard any consensus in this debate. There have been amendments proposed. If there was any consensus at all, then it did seem that many people that had suggested excluding seeds from the listing proposal and instead using #17 as the annotation if it were to be adopted, and that suggestion was accepted by the EU and its 27 member states as a co-proponent. So there may be some consensus there. We had a suggestion, I think, originally from Peru for a 24-month delay into implementation if this proposal were ultimately adopted. And the EU also then subsequently suggested a shorter period of delay of 12 months. Before I conclude on the best way forward, I would like to go back to, I guess, the lead proponent, Panama, and ask them, having heard the debate, what would they like to do? Without consensus, then the obvious way forward here is for a vote. So I would like to ask you if that's what you would like to do.
Gracias, señor presidente. Estamos de acuerdo con tomar en consideración un plazo de vigor de 18 meses para así mantener la anotación. La anotación en proceso, perdón. En consenso, perdón. Gracias, señor presidente.
Okay, one moment, please. So they're suggesting #17 plus 18 months. European Union, I see you've requested the floor, and you are a co-proponent, of course.
Thank you, Chair. We propose that the co-proponents get together and discuss how we can come to a solution that might be better to the majority here, and so we would like you to give us some time for that, please.
Okay, European Union, so you are in effect making a kind of motion to suspend the debate, a procedural motion. And of course, I will be willing to consider that if we were coming back to it first thing tomorrow morning, recognizing that we've only got 8 minutes left of today's session anyway. But as a procedural motion, I need to see if there are any objections to that. So does anyone object? We are close to the end of the session in any case, so we could come back to this first thing tomorrow morning. I'm not seeing any requests from the floor, so we suggest we suspend discussions on this topic until tomorrow morning, and to give the co-proponents a chance to discuss amongst themselves and perhaps with other parties that have intervened in this debate to see if they can come up with a way forward. But we'll resume this tomorrow morning then. So I think we don't have any other business that we can fit to the remainder of this session. So we can all have about 8 minutes of our day back to use as you will. But I will say that, I do expect to come back to this first thing tomorrow morning. So one way or the other, we would like to know what the co-proponents want to do, and if they can come up with a suggestion or a way forward where we might find consensus. I will always try to find consensus if I can. So with that, and with no further announcements from the Secretariat, I close this session, and I will see you all tomorrow morning. Thank you. Oh, there's a minute. You've got some comments from the Secretary? Yeah. So Secretariat has an announcement to make.
Thanks, Chair. The Asian region will be meeting tomorrow in the room ISMO 1 tomorrow morning, and I believe the delegation from Indonesia might know the time that meeting starts. Perhaps they can advise us of that, but Asian region meeting tomorrow in ISMO 1 tomorrow morning, and perhaps Indonesia could let us know the start time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we close the session. So thank you, and have a good evening.